And welcome into this week's edition of The Locker Room. I'm your host, Cade. Crenshaw, joined this week once again by Braden Maloy. Braden, great to have you back. This week we're talking about a number of hits and headlines from the NFL, and I think the biggest headline of the week is that the Houston Texans are looking for a new head coach. Bill OBrien fired after 7 seasons, 52-48 in Houston with 4 division titles. Braden, easy question to start out with. Did Bill OBrien deserve to be fired? 4 division titles in 7 years, but the Texans are 0-4.
I think he did. I think it's a little strange that it happened this early in the season. I felt like it could have been an off-season move, but I think with the talent he's had with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, some of the decisions he's made, trading away DeAndre Hopkins, one of the premier receivers in the league. Last year in the playoffs, they blew the 24-0 lead to the Chiefs in a game that you kind of need to have as a coach. So I think this time was coming, and it just kind of happened sooner than we expected.
You know, I think it's interesting, especially because Bill O'Brien's one of those head coaches in the NFL that holds both the head coach cap and the GM cap, which is interesting there because you look at some of the moves he's made, and I think that's where a lot of people have issues with Bill O'Brien. You mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. That trade, I think, was the last straw. But one of the ones leading up to it, and the move that's going to really put the next head coach of the Houston Texans really behind the 8 ball, so to speak, Laremy Tunsil and Kenny Stills, 2, I would say, average of the pack players for 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick that now holds for the Miami Dolphins. I think the moves that he made as general manager is probably what got him shown the door.
Yeah, I think it's hard to have that when you have the same person doing both because you kind of want your GM to just look at players overall and not act on a whim. And I think as a head coach, he was getting in tough spots and just kind of making decisions here and there that you kind of maybe want separate between the two.
Look, on the coaching side of things, I've seen worse head coaches and I've seen better. There's no doubt about that. The point being, though, is the GM hat was not for him, and that really needs to be a separate position for the Houston Texans moving forward. You look at Bill O'Brien, the question I have is how do you dismantle an ascending playoff team with a rising star young quarterback in Deshaun Watson and a little over a season? It's incredible, really. He was brought in to rebuild the Texans and try to get them to somewhat Super Bowl contender level, but instead they're one of the worst teams in football. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Texans move forward without a head coach now in Bill O'Brien. Speaking of names, we've seen plenty out there from Vegas. I know Deshaun Watson's former head coach, Dabo Swinney, is even mentioned as one of the odds-on favorites to land the job. For you, Braden, though, you look at the number of coaches across the country, who can the Texans look to?
I think Deshaun and Dabo pairing up again would be kind of a cool thing to see in the NFL. I think Dabo will stay in college. Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, he's kind of the top coach coming in for any head coach job coming up this next year. I think he's going to have his choices of teams. I think he's a very good candidate to pair with Deshaun Watson. He's worked with Mahomes. He's worked with that kind of talent level. I think he could do great. Or Lincoln Riley. He's been in a discussion these past couple years, maybe had taken the Dallas Cowboys job before Mike McCarthy last year, leaving Oklahoma, just getting back up to the NFL. I think he could be a pretty good candidate. He knows how to run an offense. We've seen Oklahoma's offense these past couple years just high and flying. Get him with Deshaun, the playmaking ability. I think that could be good for the Texans.
You know, you mentioned a college coach there in Lincoln Riley. You know, you think back to 2014, the league had fallen back in love with rising star college head coaches. You look what Chip Kelly did with the Philadelphia Eagles early on. That's kind of what started the trend, which then brought in Bill O'Brien. You know, he had that college pedigree coaching at Penn State, and of course, he was a Bill Belichick assistant for a little while, so that kind of gave him a bump up on the resume list. And we see it just doesn't work out. Very often, and very few times, I should say, have we seen a college head coach make the transition to the NFL level and be successful at it. So I think Eric Bieniemy is an incredible option there, and you see what he's done with the talent. I mean, you've got Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, the list goes on, right, in Kansas City for the reigning Super Bowl champ. So definitely I think he's going to be your number one target for the Texans, but also going to see who they bring in as GM, because that's going to be the big key for them too, is how do they rebuild and make somewhat of a future moving forward in this upcoming 2021 NFL draft with no first-round picks and not a second-round pick. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Houston Texans do closer to the NFL draft. Now, staying on the NFL side of things, let's talk about this season, right? We're 4 weeks in. Obviously, one coach is done. Could we see maybe a few more be shown the door here pretty soon?
I think so. I think you have Adam Gase down up in New York with the Jets and Dan Quinn down in Atlanta with the Falcons. Both of them have got off to 0-4 starts. Gase with the Jets, Sam Darnold looks like he's regressing, not progressing, and that's not what you want to see with your high draft pick and a new coach. And then Dan Quinn, he's prided himself on defense. He's a defensive coach, but the Falcons continue to let up 30, 40-point games. Quarterbacks throwing for 300, 400-plus yards. So they're just not getting the production and efficiency that they're supposed to be getting.
Let's look at this NFL season now, and 4 weeks into it, some teams are maybe impressing us a little bit, and some teams are disappointing dramatically. Braden, you look at this season so far, most impressive team in the NFL.
I think a ton of teams have kind of shown out. You had the Bills, they're 4-0 with Josh Allen, the Seahawks with Russell Wilson doing what Russell Wilson does. But I think my team is really going to be Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers, he's kind of on his revenge tour. You know, they drafted a quarterback to kind of be his replacement, and I don't think he liked that too much. He's come out and put up a 92.8 QBR rating. It's just the highest in NFL history in the first 4 games. Their offense has scored 30-plus points in the first 4 games with 0 turnovers. No offense has ever done that. I think they are clicking on all cylinders. This past Monday night, he had 3 touchdowns to a third-round tight end. Like, they're just hitting everybody. They're scoring points. Their defense is putting together stops, getting the ball back to Aaron Rodgers, and I think that's just the element to win.
Aaron Rodgers is proving that he's still a top 3 quarterback in this league at 36 years old. And the big key here that nobody's really looking at, they've played the last 2 games without Devontae Adams. And that's a big key for this Packers team. Easily one of, if not the top receiver in the NFL. He's been out with a hamstring. So he could be back this next week. We'll see. But the Packers, they're playing perfectly fine without him. Offensively, they are the best offense in the league right now. And that's including the Chiefs, right? You look at this Packers offense on paper especially, they're second in the league in offensive yards per game and first in points per game with 38. You look now, their 4 wins aren't over great teams. Now, the schedule is favorable for them moving forward, but I'm not seeing really any weakness in this Packers team so far, especially with how well they're playing defensively as well. So you also look at the draft. You mentioned bringing in Jordan Love. A lot of people thought, oh, this is the next successor to Aaron Rodgers. We're going to see, 13 be shown the door a little bit. Not the case at all, right? And another key here, the Packers drafted 0 wide receivers in this NFL draft. 0. And Aaron Rodgers is still getting it done without the league's best. So that's an incredible move there for Rodgers, too. So the Packers are 4-0, and they're cruising towards a playoff spot. The team that had a lot of Super Bowl hype at the beginning of the season for a lot of people, including myself, that's really disappointing, is the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, they have not been there with the wins. Their offense is, again, high-flying, kind of like it normally has the past couple of years. Dak is throwing for 400, 500 yards a game. They have the number 1 passing offense in the league. I like to see him get Zeke a little more involved. He's kind of a serviceable. They'll give it to him a couple times, but really relying on Dak. I think their biggest disadvantage is defense. They can't stop anybody. They can score the points all they want, but if they can't get the stops, they don't win the games.
You mentioned the defense for the Dallas Cowboys, and it's been a rough road for them the past 4 weeks. So far, not only do they rank 30th in offensive yards allowed per game, from there, they rank 31st in rushing yards allowed per game and dead last in points per game. You thought bringing in Mike McCarthy was going to fix the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, that's not the answer. This team has the talent to win. They have Dak Prescott. They have Ezekiel Elliott. They have Amari Cooper, among other small key pieces here and there, Michael Gallup being one. There's tons of pieces on this team to win. They just are not getting it done.
No, I think you can put a lot of the blame on their defensive coordinator, Nolan. Mike McCarthy brought him in. He hadn't been a coordinator for the past 4 or 5 years in the NFL. So he's kind of bringing in a guy who's not quite up with the modern day NFL. I mean, there's a reason he hadn't coached for 5 years. So I think a lot of it's scheming and late game coaching that you can boil it down to.
It's definitely both flip sides of the coin for the Packers and the Cowboys so far through 4 weeks in the season. And now, Braden, I think the biggest storyline heading into the season was the new faces in new places. We had Tom Brady going down to Tampa Bay to be a Buccaneer, and Cam Newton going over with Bill Belichick in New England. So far, Cam in New England or Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, which experiment do you think has worked out best?
Honestly, I think they've kind of had the same track record. If you look at both teams, they're very similar. Both have great defenses. Tampa Bay is one of the top in the league, and New England's always had that New England stout defense. Both kind of have a serviceable running game. They're not going to rely on it. Leonard Fournette, he can get you 50 yards a game, and then the Patriots have like kind of their cycle of bats with Michelle and all of them. They both have great coaches. Bruce Arians, Bill Belichick. We know their track record. We know what they've been able to do with teams. But you can tell both teams need their quarterback. Both teams, the Bucs need Brady, and the Patriots need Cam Newton. You saw what happened on Monday night against the Chiefs. That offense just could not get anything going. Turnovers after turnovers. Honestly, I think if you had Cam Newton in that game, they might win that game just because their defense was keeping them in it. So I think both quarterbacks have worked great in both systems. Cam's 2-1, Brady's 3-1. I think we need to see a little more in the season, kind of to get more going to see which one works out the best.
4 weeks in, 12 more to go so far in this NFL 2020 season. It's been exciting so far with plenty of storylines to follow. The main one, the hottest one I should say right now, is who's going to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans and leading the charge with Deshaun Watson. Braden, thank you for joining us this week once again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll see you next time here on The Locker Room. For Brady Maloy, I'm Cade Crenshaw. We'll see you next week.